Welcome back to Football on the 40. After an uncomfortable and close win in the college football playoff quarterfinal against the Big 12 champions Arizona State, the Longhorns are moving on to the semifinal where they will face Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. The Longhorns are one win away from playing for a national championship. During this episode, we're going to briefly reflect on the Arizona State win, but we'll spend most of our time previewing this huge matchup in Arlington against Ohio State. As always, I'm joined by my co-hosts Andrew and Kevin. This podcast is produced by Hamilton Lizer. All right, fellas, let's get into it. Andrew, Kevin, how have we been doing? Kevin, we'll start with you first. What have you been up
Good.
to?
Great. I mean, the rest of New Year's week was good. It was a little weird coming back and just working 2 days and then going back on a weekend. I don't think I've quite hit my stride here in 2025, but been on Twitter a lot, reading about, the targeting call that was not, and yeah, I feel lucky to get past Arizona State. That one was really close. Um, we watched it together at Andrew's house, had a good time. And yeah, I was pretty, feeling confident in the first quarter and lost a bet. I bet that ASU would not tie it up. And I had to do a milk shoey. Uh, for those who don't know that is know what that is. That's drinking milk out of one of my tennis shoes. So I did pay up on that bet, Andrew, and you have seen the video, but um, yeah, I know there's been a lot of like talk about it, but that game was way too close for comfort, and I am now officially not optimistic anymore. So we'll get into that later. Yeah.
Oh
Wow.
no. Oh no, we
Okay,
lost
Andy, what about
optimistic
you?
Kev. Yeah, it was a great time. We all watched the game at my house, like Kev said. Everyone ate their black eyed peas. Bo, I hope you ate yours. But yeah, everything was good. For most part, then Arizona State made their comeback, obviously, and we had to, pull a rabbit out of a hat to secure that victory. But just thankful we won every year. It seems like national champions have to have a game like this to or in order to secure a national championship. Usually, or it used to be in the regular season, but now with the expanded playoff, I feel like it's going to happen more often. However, Ohio State's a beast, so there's a lot of reasons to be pessimistic, like Kevin has said. So that's definitely not unwarranted. Go ahead, Kev.
I was just gonna mention one little funny tidbit about watching the game at your house. Like you mentioned, we ate our black eyed peas. It was like second or third quarter when they were heated up and ready, and Garrett was there. Doesn't like black eyed peas. He grabbed one, and he like popped it in and ate it. Didn't make a fuss or anything, but ate one. And then the play after was like amazing for Texas. And Garrett goes, "Wow, these work fast." I thought it was just a funny story from watching the game together. Garrett's always got the quips, but that was a really good one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for
Garrett's
sure.
quick with them. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
nice. Yeah, jealous. I missed y'all for the game, but got to watch with our previous host and recurring guest, Jake. We got to watch it at Dirty Martin's. I did not have my black eyed pea, which maybe is explains why Arizona State game was so close, but I did talk to Jake about it and he had his, so we're covered there on that front. But
There
yeah,
you go.
I've had a good New Year's as well and got to spend some time in Houston and had some and a new place with the fam. So it's been an eventful few days. Kevin, do you have something to add?
I got one more thing. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but um, I attended Paige's wedding
Oh yeah.
recently and ran into Nikki and Luke. No longer Nikki Miller, but we knew her in college. And we were talking for a couple minutes about the podcast, and Nikki and Luke are huge fans of the pod. So I want to shout them out and thank you both for being, supportive of us and listening weekly. Um, Always good to hear when some of our friends are enjoying this content. So thank you guys and hook 'em.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Laurel had shared Kevin's wife had shared Nikki's Spotify Wrapped, And I think we were in her top five, like right under like Call Her Daddy and the New York Times, The Daily. I was like, that is rarefied space to be in. So
Yeah.
I'm very pleased with that. So thanks, Nikki.
Yeah.
Definitely appreciate that.
Hockey stick, fellas, hockey stick.
Hockey stick.
One more thing I want to add from the game is that I'm really happy, not necessarily how the game went down, because it shouldn't have been as close as it was, but that was Quinn's legacy game for sure. Really happy for Quinn. No matter what happens in the Ohio State game, I think Quinn solidified himself as the third best quarterback for Texas football since 2000. He made that step. Um, I kind of joked with the guys, but he had his magnum moment, kind of referencing Sue Lander, and he finally had that moment, which all Longhorn fans had been waiting for. So really happy for Quinn. He's done a lot for our program, and I think people are appreciating it even more so after all he did in overtime and in the fourth quarter too, with 5 minutes left. So very happy for Quinn. Just an awesome moment for him.
I wouldn't say it was interesting, but it was memorable how a lot of different people were using that term. Like, this is a legacy drive for Quinn. It's a legacy game for Quinn. When we were watching it together, we said that to each other. And Michael Wiesner texted me that right after we had talked about it. Like, this is a legacy drive for Quinn. And there was also a
Mhm.
bunch of like talking heads on Twitter, like looking back and saying it was a legacy game for him. So it's kind of like, a lot of fans and viewers were kind of thinking the same thing, like acknowledging whether it's yourself or somebody you know well, like a lot of people have gone sour on Quinn in the last 4 or 5 games. So had that gone poorly and we lost, like I don't think he would be a quarterback that many people would look back and, have good feelings, you know what I mean? So it was massive for him. And he
Yeah.
obviously played a gigantic role in the win. I think or ASU had scored and kicked the extra point right, and we were 4th and 13. He famously like changes the pass coverage because they were showing blitz. I think Arizona State had already used their timeout. They couldn't call a timeout at that point. And Sark in postgame said that they had run that exact play, assuming that Arizona State would be in that coverage, and the whole team basically understood the dynamics of the play and why it would work because there was two routes on the right side that were putting a safety into conflict. And what we saw on the field apparently is exactly what they practiced leading up to the game. So good on Sark for the preparation and analysis of Arizona State's defense. Like it wasn't a mistake. Like it was a very purposeful play that they called. And the execution was there too. But he followed that with like you know, TV missed it, but we scored on the next play in the next overtime and then got the 2 point conversion, which elation, obviously, that we got 8 points there, but we didn't actually need it because of the interception. Anyways, I know I just went super deep on Quinn's contributions late there, but it really was because, like, I've got people in my family that I've talked about before that, like, kind of don't like Quinn now after some of the
Mhm.
interceptions and not being able to beat Georgia.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have friends in my life that are, I mean, I think we're all ready for Arch, but like I think we're all, the three of us are in a camp of appreciating Quinn while he's here and, happy to roll with him. So yeah, for me, in terms of like what stood out, honestly, the day after the game, I texted Joe. I was like, I still can't believe we won. Like I was just kind of like during the game when we were up 16 and then they scored, like I think the broadcast said like a minute and 8 seconds. I was like, what? That did not feel like that short amount of time. It felt like a lifetime of like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Oh my gosh, we're gonna blow it. Oh my gosh, how did they just get two-point conversions in a row? Like this is crazy. Quinn just threw a pick. Like what is happening? This is terrible. And in kind of like the same amount of time, like Kevin, like what you talked about, just a quick bounce back in overtime as well. Just probably about the same amount of time if there was a game clock in overtime. So yeah, happy to move ahead. Got the win. Happy to move ahead to Ohio State.
Yeah. A couple other things. Like you were saying, Bo, in the game dynamics in the second half and overtime, I feel like third and fourth quarter, everything that ASU needed happened for them.
Yeah.
And then as soon as overtime started, it just flipped. Every single thing that needed to happen for us to win happened. But one other take for me going forward, I mentioned how I'm not super optimistic anymore because I have been, is there was a little bit of talk about Arizona State's defense and their defensive line specifically. They didn't have a single player on their D line that was over 300 pounds.
Hmm.
Whatever they did on defense throughout the season, showed in the stats. We talked about it last week, but we only had 53 rushing yards against them. And out of nowhere, a team that's picked preseason to be last in the Big 12, has a great season, is basically made up of transfer portal guys and people coming from like Texas that are third string. Like they totally shut us down.
Yeah.
And I'll get into it when we talk about Ohio State's team, but we're going from playing like mid-level talent in the defensive line to playing against one of the most experienced, efficient defensive lines in the country. So like I don't know, man. If we can't run the ball, like if we couldn't do it against ASU, I feel like our season might be over. But that's just a stat that jumps off the page. Like how do you have our O line, great running backs, great scheme, and we got 50 rushing yards? Like that's glad we won the game, but that's bad.
Hmm.
Yeah, wasn't good. So, yeah, something's got to change for sure. But yeah, anything else y'all want to say about the game? Okay, let's dive into Ohio State, guys. Y'all ready?
Let's
Like we
do it.
do every single week. We got five quick facts about the team that we're playing. So this week, obviously, it's going to be about Ohio State. So let's start off with number one. This has been in the news semi recently, so most of the listeners out there probably know this, but if you don't, Ohio State has trademarked the word "the" as they famously refer to themselves as the Ohio State University. Um, I think it's kind of obnoxious and ridiculous that they have that trademarked, but so be it. Yeah, number two, Ohio State, for every All-American that they have, they plant a tree in this like area right outside the stadium. Um, and they have I think they have nearly 200 trees in that area. So that commemorates all the All-Americans that they've had. So um, a cool little tradition. I guess similar in a way to like what Clemson did with their like graveyard, but not as creepy. So um, yeah, I like that better. Kev, you got something to say?
I just think that was funny. Similar but not as creepy. That was good.
I we're all like all synced up because I had this same thought. I was like, that is
Yeah.
so much better than the thing that Clemson does.
For those who missed it, what we're referencing, the comp there is I think every ranked win that Clemson has, they have a tombstone in a fake graveyard for every team that they've beat that was ranked at the time or something like that.
I think it's ranked away wins, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I think
you're
that's
right,
what it
Bo.
is. But
So
still, and then yeah, we looked it up on Google and it's as bizarre as it sounds. Definitely.
Yeah.
yeah.
Tombstones don't, capture carbon, so the planted trees for people that are still alive is good for a lot of reasons. Moving on.
Okay, moving on. I had no idea that this about this third one, but Four Loco was invented by Ohio State students. I don't know if y'all knew that, but yeah, Kev is especially thankful. I'm kidding, but but yeah, was kind of surprised to find that out. And then yeah, number four, Rutherford B. Hayes, our 19th president. He established Ohio State University while he was governor. I thought that was kind of cool. And then lastly, famous alumni, as we do every single week. JD Vance, our soon to be vice president, he went there. Kirk Herbstreit, Kev's favorite announcer. Um, Jesse Owens, I forgot that he went there. Jack Nicklaus, if you're a big golfer, you obviously know that, but if you're not, he went there. Urban Meyer, he got a grad degree at Ohio State. He was a grad assistant. Bob Knight, he played on the basketball team there, but famously coached at Indiana for a long period of time. And then George Steinbrenner, the owner of the Yankees for, what was it, about 30, 40 years before he passed away. He went to Ohio State as well, which I didn't know that one. But Yeah, anything else about the facts about Ohio State that caught your all's eyes?
Four local ones funny. I have a like a Kirk Herbstreit take, but Bowen, maybe you want to share a generic. What stood out to you there?
No, I think the Buckeye tree was the big one for me. So I want to hear your Herb Street take.
Sure. Obviously, Kirk Herbstreit is now a household name. Big year for him, for good and bad. You know, he's on game day, had his beloved dog pass away about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago. And he's been huge in like the college football world, media world for a long time, maybe 15 years, maybe longer. He's going to be calling our game against Ohio State on Saturday, and he called Ohio State's game last weekend against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. I don't know if you guys watched much of the Rose Bowl, but with everything that went on in New Orleans, um, ESPN had to kind of like shake up the production plan for that evening, because they were probably planning to like cut pretty quickly after the Rose Bowl ceremony to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl. But they changed up their programming and they kept ESPN at the Rose Bowl for actually like a couple hours after the game because they just had like free open time, right? So if you were watching, there was a couple things that happened that were like keyed to me that like ESPN's kind of like winging it right now because they're having to adjust their production plan after the terrorist event in New Orleans. And the first key for me was um, they did a couple on-field interviews, and a lot of the Ohio State players were running towards the band to sing the fight song. And normally, you wouldn't have audio out of the booth at that time, so you're not like hearing what Fowler and Herbstreit are saying to each other a whole lot while they're playing their fight song. It's more just quiet cameras, and you're listening to the band. But I think someone made a production mistake, and Kirk Herbstreit's mic was on during that, and he was singing quietly Ohio State's fight song. He's a massive Ohio State football fan. His son is like a walk-on or a backup of some kind on the Ohio State football team now. And he talked a couple weeks ago about even like attending after the Michigan loss an Ohio State football banquet where he was with the team and kind of was able to see how they were reacting. And he's an alumni, so he's like as big of an Ohio State fan as we are Longhorns. And I haven't had issues with Kirk Herbstreit in a couple years. I did after he called Texas a cesspool in the what was his name? Gosh,
I mean, we were kind of accessible though
In
at
the
that
Herman
time.
era,
it was in
No,
like the
it was in the
Herman.
Charlie's. It was
Yeah, it
like
was in
Charlie
the
era, I think.
Charlie Strong Herman era. He called us a cesspool. It was like basically ranted about Texas on live TV, and that pissed me off for a couple years. But since then, I'm pro Kirk Herbstreit until this happened because as an analyst, he's careful to like not cause conflicts, right, with his job. Like when he's on game day and he's calling a game, he doesn't call that win or loss in the morning because he wants to be able to present it, from a central or neutral point, right? And ESPN accidentally revealed that like every time this damn fight song comes on, like Kirk Herbstreit's singing it under his breath. Like, so I'm a little disappointed that after that, number one, it wasn't recognized. There was nothing big on Twitter about it, but he's such a homer for Ohio State, and he's going to be calling our game this week. So it's kind of inevitable that he's going to do something that makes me mad in the next couple days.
I think he'll be professional, but
that's
that's
a
just
good
my
call out though,
opinion.
Kev. Now the listeners can have a watchful eye on Kirk, and if he
Yeah.
says something that's
Yeah.
suspect, we'll know the.
I feel like singing one of the team's fight songs from the booth is like a step too far. Maybe I'm just too sensitive, but that should not be happening at the level of
It
ESPN.
probably shouldn't, but I don't think he was expecting it. Like you said, if you think your mic is off, I feel like you. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see how he presents the game on Friday. Kev might have a outburst at some point, some rage text about Kirk. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, just want to say this about their football program. Obviously, one of the blue bloods as well. They've been around since 1890. Um, yeah, they've dominated college football. One of the probably top two or three programs in college football history. So one of the few schools that has a better college football history than Texas. And there's not many, but 41 conference championships, 8 national championships. Those are all legit too. They're not, none of those are fake. So, yeah, they're a legit program. Obviously, for most of our lives, they've been extremely relevant, unlike Texas. So they're there every year. They're consistent every year, and they hardly have any downfalls. But one thing I kind of want to bring up, and I really won't dive into this because I think most people have a history of the 3 games that we've played against them in the 2000s, and our first game ever was in 2005. But I was rewatching the 2005 game, just like the end of it the other day, and this was really interesting. This did not would not age well, if this would have happened today. But Vince Young on the last, I think it was the last drive, um, got knocked out of the game for a play, and he might have had a concussion, a minor concussion, who knows. But after the game, they're interviewing him, and they're asking him about the hit that he took, and he said, "Yeah, I had a head injury. I got a little dizzy." And then Mac Brown, right afterwards, he proceeded to joke that, Vince, he stays dizzy, but I like it that way. So they're just openly joking about concussions, and Vince definitely might have had a concussion at the end of that game, which is not surprising based on how that game went and how good Ohio State's defense was. But that's just something that caught my eye and something that for sure would not be said in today's day and age, and shows how much things can change within 20 years. So, but yeah, all the games for the most part have been close. Even in 2006, where Ohio State won by 17, Ohio State kind of pulled away at the end, but that game was close too, and that was a huge matchup. And I think Texas will surprise some people this week. So I'm taking a little bit different of opinion than Kevin, but we'll talk about that more in a second. But yeah, Kevin, Bo, one of y'all, can y'all kind of preview where the game is? Weather, not really.
Yeah,
Going to be much weather inside, but go ahead.
sure. So game is 6:30 Central on Friday, January 10th at Jerry World. So Arlington, AT&T Stadium. It's going to be on ESPN, and weather-wise, the stadium is not exposed to the outdoors very much, so not a concern there, especially for our kicking game. Bert might appreciate. Honestly, he might appreciate some wind after, kicking poorly in a dome last weekend. Anyways, it's gonna be really cold and like icy before the game. So those of us driving up to Dallas, DFW area for the game need to be aware of that. Um, Might have some dangerous conditions on the road, but football weather, not a concern. Um, Ohio State so far is 12-2 on the season. They've now beaten Tennessee and Oregon pretty good, by large margins in the CFP. Their regular season losses were a road game at Oregon, I think the same weekend as the OU game, and a the last game of the regular season at home against Michigan. They kind of famously just fumbled that, and there was like a fight at midfield because Michigan was trying to plant their flag on the O. And people were really down on Ohio State, especially on Ryan Day at that point. But they have totally turned the tides and really turned on the Jets in the CFP so far. So um, we'll break down their team by first, like we like to talk about the head coach's backstory a little bit, and then we'll get into offense and defense. I'm going to talk about Ryan Day a little bit, the current head coach of Ohio State. He is 68-10 as the Ohio State head coach, and he's won two Big Ten championships. He's 4-4 in bowl games with 3 wins in the CFP, but no national championships. And like I said, right now, maybe not at the moment, but just a couple weeks ago, like the Ohio State fans basically wanted to fire Ryan Day. The Michigan rivalry for them is arguably more important to their fans than the OU game is for us. And Ryan Day is 1-4 against Michigan. He's lost the last 4 matchups against Michigan, which is really, really, really ticking off their fan base after Ryan Day's two predecessors went. I think Jim Tressel went 9-1 against Michigan, and Urban Meyer was 7-0 against Michigan. So to their fans, they're like, "What the heck? This is not Ohio State football. The team up north is awful. We need to beat them. Let's get rid of this Ryan Day guy." So there's a lot of I guess mixed opinions of Ryan Day, especially for Ohio State fans, but honestly, he's killing it since the loss to Michigan. Um, in his like pre-coaching backstory, the interesting tidbit that I found that I've never heard of before is that he had a pretty challenging upbringing. His father committed suicide when Ryan was only 9 years old, and to this day, like um, mental health awareness, especially for adolescents and like young kids, is he and his wife's like mission. They
Mhm.
do a lot in their community to donate money and support causes for mental health awareness. Something I didn't know about, and I didn't know it affected him that personally. Um, Also pretty interesting. He's married to Christina Spiru, who he calls Nina, and they met when Ryan was only 6 years old when they were playing on the same softball team. They were married in 2005 and now have three kids together. So, for those of us that like hear a lot of sports related takes on Ryan Day, those are two things to consider about his backstory that like might change your perception of him. Um, I've got a lot of notes on like his coaching history, but I'll focus on his relationships with Urban Meyer and Chip Kelly and kind of his story of coming to Ohio State. Um, his Ryan Day's first OC role um, was actually, let me go back to when he played. Ryan Day played football at the University of New Hampshire, and the last season that he played, Chip Kelly was his offensive coordinator. Chip Kelly and he like have a lot of ties. Chip Kelly, after the New Hampshire job, went to Oregon and like got a lot of notoriety for modern offense, especially like no huddle offense. And he immediately went to the NFL where he coached for the 49ers and for the Eagles before the 49ers. Chip Kelly kind of brought Ryan Day along. Ryan Day was on both of those staffs at the Eagles and the 49ers. And they've now linked back up because Chip Kelly is Ryan Day's offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Um, Also, Ryan Day was a graduate assistant at Florida when Urban Meyer was at Florida, and Urban is the one that brought him to Ohio State. Ryan Day eventually took over as head coach at Ohio State when Urban Meyer retired after like a tumultuous season where it came out that Urban knew about a domestic violence issue on his staff. It was a fellow coach named Zach Smith, and Urban did nothing about it. So that I think 2018 season, Urban was on administrative leave for 3 games. Ryan Day coached for him. At the end of the season, Urban retires and Ryan Day took over full time. So um, his coaching tree is like really intertwined with both Urban and Chip Kelly's, and it's kind of cool to see how they bop around together and link up before big seasons and big moments like this. So Chip Kelly's a big name. He's the OC for Ohio State right now. Um, Andy, anything you want to mention about, the conflicted Ohio State fans and their views of Ryan Day or anything in his story?
Yeah, I mean, I forget his exact record, but I mean, insane record since he's joined Ohio State as their head coach. Obviously, has had his struggles against Michigan, and that needs to change. They should have won this year. I don't know. It's still baffling how they lost a game this year, but I mean, I think it's crazy that a lot of Ohio State fans have a national championship or bust type of viewpoint with Ryan Day. And I mean, if he were to get fired, which I think that's really stupid, but if he were to get fired, I mean, he'd be the hottest coaching name in the last, what, 5 years at least, that's been available on the market. So, um, it, I know most likely he probably would take some time off, but yeah, I just don't understand where Ohio State fans are coming from. I know losing to Michigan's not fun, but Mac Brown lost to OU 5 years straight, and if we would have fired him, we would not have won a natty. So
Yeah.
Ohio State fans, be patient. Y'all very well might win a national championship this year, so all this might be a moot point. But
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy how much the discourse, Kevin, that you were kind of referring to about, well, Andy, you were talking about it too, like firing him after the Michigan loss, like that was like at peak. And then because of how much they've dominated in the playoffs, there's like not even a whisper of that anymore. I mean, there's like the Michigan kind of subtext and everything, but they've just been dominating like really, really hard in
Yeah.
in the playoffs. And I mean, I guess they've probably technically had the hardest path in the playoffs, right? Of the
Hmm.
four remaining teams. I mean, and the fashion in which they've won has been, I mean, got to tip their cap to them. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, they absolutely boat raced Tennessee in Ohio. Tennessee had tens of thousands of fans travel up for that game, and they really showed up in numbers. And they were beaten 42 to 17, just never had a chance. And then in the Rose Bowl, it was kind of the same way. I think at halftime, Oregon only had like 3 points, so they didn't have a touchdown, and the game was basically already over. Like these games have not been close. They have been so dominant, and this is like a scary team this week. Okay, we'll go through Ohio State's offense. Andy, help me out with this a little bit. But Ohio State is ranked 22nd in the country in offense, going against Texas's defense, which is ranked third. I want to start with their rushing offense. They're 49th in the country. Doesn't jump off the page, but they have some parallels to like what we are used to watching on offense. They have two really good running backs that are actually only 1 yard away from one another in terms of production right now. It's senior Travion Henderson, who's averaging 7.3 yards per carry and has 10 touchdowns and 925 yards, and junior Quinshawn Judkins, who has average of 5.3 yards per carry, also 10 touchdowns and 924 yards. So basically the same yards production. Um, like one other thing I'll mention about these two guys is neither has fumbled this year. Um, so consistent production, and they do not turn over the ball. So Andy, anything you want to call out about their rushing attack?
yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, but I mean, based on their statistics, it's kind of crazy that neither one has over 1,000 yards, even though they rush the ball very well between the both of them. But
Hmm.
I think it kind of shows that their struggle, the kind of the kryptonite for Ohio State, which has been solved so far in the CFP, their offensive line, which has had their ups and downs throughout the year. You think they could be just a dominant rushing attack, but there's been times during the season, even though the stats are impressive, they haven't been able to run the ball as well, and hopefully that shows up or I mean, it doesn't show up for Texas. Hopefully they struggle running the ball against us. If they do, then that allows Texas to have a game with them. So,
Yeah.
but both of those running backs are top running backs. They're going to be in the NFL one day. So, definitely a scary duo.
Yeah. Going into their passing attack, which is ranked 28th in the country, they average like 260 yards per game passing, which is worse than Texas. Like tying it to the running backs and parallels to our offense. One difference that you'll see watching Ohio State in the passing game is they don't get their running backs involved in the passing game hardly at all. I hope I don't regret that statement. They might break convention. But in Sark's offense, you see a lot of dump passes and screens. In this offense, we will not. But the passing attack is led by Will Howard, who transferred to Ohio State from Kansas State. I think Will is from Ohio. Correct me on that if that's wrong, Andy. I don't know if you know.
I think it's from Pennsylvania, but
Okay.
I could be wrong. I don't know that
Yeah.
exactly off the top of my head.
Definitely not from Kansas. I thought he was, but he's not. We have faced Will how many times?
3 times.
Yeah, so Texas
So,
has played Will Howard in Kansas State 3 times, and has he ever beat Texas?
nope, no.
Yeah.
So, yeah, technically we've he's been on the team 4 times, but one of the games he did not play against Texas. So 0-3 all time against Texas.
So hopefully that continues, but Will has been having a pretty good season. Mid-season, he made like a mental error in a really late drive against Oregon, which is kind of the reason Ohio State lost to Oregon. I think he was running and sliding in field goal territory where, if the quarterback gets down with enough time, Ohio State's gonna kick for three and they're gonna win. And he kind of like ran too far or something like that and forgot about the clock, and they didn't lose because of him, but like kind of did. Anyways, he's got 300 like around 3,500 yards passing this season. His completion percentage is great. It's almost 73%. For reference, Quinn's is like 66%. He's got 32 touchdowns, only 9 interceptions, and an ESPN quarterback efficiency rating that's like 25 points better than Quinn's also. So having a good season, not turning over the ball too much. What else do you have on Will Howard, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, he's a familiar face, like we've said. We've faced him three times. The first two matchups, he really was not that impressive. Last year when he played against us, led a pretty big comeback. We were up by 20 points, and he led Kansas State back, forced overtime against us, but we ended up winning at the end. We had a goal line stand against them, and that was one of the more memorable games of our season last year. I think this is something that we should take note of. And this happened actually earlier in the year for Will Howard. So, just some background on him. Whether he grew up in Ohio or Pennsylvania, um, what I forget where exactly, but I think it's Pennsylvania, but I could be wrong. He was a huge Penn State fan growing up, and he always wanted to go to Penn State, and Penn State never offered. Um, so that was one of the main reasons why he ended up at Kansas State and then eventually at Ohio State. But going into that Penn State game, it was a huge matchup for him. And personally, you can tell he really wanted to make a huge impact in that game. And he honestly struggled. He had one of his worst games of the season. He threw an early pick six. He had a fumble that went in the back of the end zone for a touchback. Honestly, it was pretty sloppy in that game. And with his record being 0-3 against Texas, kind of similar vibes to how Baker Mayfield was too. Now Baker might have had more hatred for Texas than Will Howard, but Baker started off 0-2 in his career against Texas, and in 2016 he started off that game really sloppy against us. Had two interceptions, was kind of overthrowing the ball all over the place to his receivers. OU eventually ended up winning that game, but I think that was primarily due to having a massive talent advantage over Texas at that time, more so than anything else. But long story short, the mentality of a quarterback can make a major impact in a game, and especially for someone like Will Howard, who's never been Texas, you can guarantee that he wants to finish his career with at least one victory against us. Um, and I think that's something we need to keep an eye on because Ohio State has played really fast and gone out to these big leads, like Kevin has mentioned. And if they're not able to do that, that really goes in the favor of Texas. So if he starts overthrowing, if he has a couple turnovers, it's going to be massive for the Horns. And I think that's something that could realistically happen on Friday.
Hope so. A couple guys that he's passing to that I wanted to call out were first freshman Jeremiah Smith, who is a beast, had a huge Rose Bowl. This freshman had 187 yards receiving in the Rose Bowl. His average reception went for 26.7 yards, and he caught two touchdowns. He's going to be a problem. He's 6'3", 215. On the season, he's got 70 receptions, well over 1,000 yards, and 14 touchdowns. And then senior Emike Egbuka. Sorry if I butchered that. But he's also got 70 receptions, almost 900 yards receiving, and then 10 touchdowns. Production really drops off after these two. So I guess that's good news, but also, you know, I know our secondary is a strong point of the team, but to have two of these guys to defend against is going to be a real challenge. Um,
Yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
want to mention about these two?
Well, the thing is, you can't double both. So it's matchup problems all over the place, and you know, I think Oregon did not do a good job. I think they put too much emphasis on trying to stop the run against Ohio State, rather focusing on these two receivers. And Tennessee kind of did the same thing. And so it was a lot of one-on-one matchups, and that's just a nightmare scenario. So hopefully our defense comes in with a better game plan than what Oregon and Tennessee did.
Yeah. That's pretty much all I got on the offense. Do you want to call out anything else, Andy, there?
Yeah, nothing on the offense. Go ahead with the defense.
Okay. Um, for starters, their defense is good. They're ranked first in the country. I've alluded a lot to how highly Texas's defense is ranked after giving up a lot of yards and points to both Clemson and Arizona State. Our defense has dropped off a little bit, but they're still a strong point of the team. I think we're ranked third now, so still in the top five. That's not too bad. Um, anyways, their defense is a problem. They're only averaging 12.1 points per game. They're not turning the ball over a whole lot. They've got 9 interceptions and 8 fumble recoveries, but they are getting a lot of sacks. For referencing on the sacks, Texas has 44 sacks, so it's not like Ohio State is on a different planet. But when you start to look at the players behind these stats, that's where I get a little bit concerned. So Texas has 44 sacks on the season. We've got a good pass rush. Ohio State has 47, and their sack leaders are defensive end JT Tuimoloau, who's got 10, defensive end Jack Sawyer, who has 8. Jack is one of the players that was like getting in fights with Michigan at midfield. And then finally, linebacker Cody Simon, who's got 7 sacks. So I started looking into this a little bit more, and peeling the onion is where I got scared and is why I'm not super confident. Part of the reason why their pass rushers, their defensive line are all seniors, and they're all huge. So I mentioned the defensive ends, seniors, um, 6'5", 269, 6'5", 260. Their defensive tackles that are seniors are 6'3", 327, and 6'3", 295. So um, Ohio State recruits really well. I don't know if these guys have been at Ohio State the whole time, but like with the transfer portal area, I feel like this is a lot of seniority in the defense. And looking at some of their like leading tacklers, a lot of their secondaries, like juniors and seniors as well. So um, makes sense that the best defense in the country is players that have a lot of experience and are creating a lot of production. So I mean, Sark is Sark. His offense is good, but I wouldn't be surprised if we scored like under 30 points this game. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, they've only given up more than 22 times this year, both to Oregon. So, and we all know how good of an offense Oregon has. I think 8 of the 11 starters on Ohio State they are all seniors or grad transfers. So, a lot of them came back this year with the goal of winning a national championship. So, they are by far the most experienced team that is left in the CFP, and there's a lot of advantages to that, like you said, Kev.
Yeah, that's all we got on Ohio State. Let's get into weekly trivia and then betting corner.
Awesome. Okay, so uh, for the listeners out there, Bowen's leading 20-17. Um, hopefully there's a couple more trivias out there, but you never know with how the season goes. So, um, yeah, let's just get into this one quickly. Guys, I'm going to ask y'all 3 questions, just kind of same format as we typically do. So, okay. So for the first one, Ohio State is the only school to have a player win the Heisman Trophy 2 times. What, and that was Archie Griffin, by the way. What year was his first Heisman? Uh, Bowen, you can go first. Kevin, you can go second.
I got my number.
Okay, I'll do mine too. 1976.
Okay.
I went I went 1968.
Bo, you got it right, 1974.
Ooh,
So,
nice.
point there for Bowen. Um, or actually, yeah, point there for Bowen. So, okay, going to question number 2. Quinn, Obviously, went to Ohio State for his freshman year before coming to Texas. Uh, his most lucrative NIL deal was a big storyline that offseason, why he reclassified early, skipped his senior season, and went to Ohio State because he could capitalize on NIL while in high school you could not. Um, do y'all remember how much money Quinn signed for? And this was with GT Sports Marketing. It was a 3-year contract, so we're looking for the total number for over 3 years. Kev, you go first. Bowen, you go second.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go 2.8 million.
2.8. Okay.
Dang, I'm like Price is Right and Kev. I went three because I thought he got a million from Ohio State and came to Texas.
So the answer was 1.4 million.
Oh,
So,
damn.
so Kev, you got that. That was big. So, last question. Whoever gets it right, well, there's a chance neither of y'all get it right. So, we'll just see. But third question. Texas played in the first ever, or their first ever Cotton Bowl in 1943. I think the first ever Cotton Bowl was 1937. Could be wrong on that by a year or two, but yeah, the first one was 1943. Which current ACC school did they beat that year? Bowen, you're first. Kevin, you're second.
Ooh. Let's go UNC.
Okay,
Hmm.
Kevin.
I hope this team's in the ACC because it's just sticking in my mind. I'm gonna go Boston College. If they're not in the ACC, I'm gonna hit myself in the head.
They are in the ACC, but it's
Okay.
not. It's not Boston College. I'm sorry. Neither of y'all get that right. Um, it was Georgia Tech.
Mm.
They were in the SEC at the time, so that's why I said current ACC team. And then the funny thing was the next year Texas would play in the Cotton Bowl again, but they played Randolph Field, which was a military base in San Antonio, still currently a military base in San Antonio in 1944, which makes sense because that was in the middle of World War II.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just kind of a funny thing to see Texas playing Randolph Field, and they tied that game. So yeah, that's
Hmm.
it for trivia. The margin stays the same. Bowen's leading 21-17 or 21-18. And there's at least one more week. So, Kev, there's still an opportunity for you. We'll see.
Nice. Holding on. Thanks, Andy. All right. Well, I will take us into betting corner. Last week was very profitable for me, which is rare, very rare. I was up a little over 7 units. I needed overtime from Texas to get there, but they got it done. Kevin and Andy did not fare well. I don't think either of them won a single bet last week. Yep, they were all L's across the board. Kevin was down 8 units last week. Andy was down six, which brings this total on the season. I'm down a little over 20 units. Kevin is now down almost 40. He's at 38.4. And Andy is, um, this is a bad omen, but Andy's at
Ominously.
the devil's
Ominously.
number. You could argue that's even worse. So he's at minus 6.66. So
Oh,
pretty rough
Oh,
showing by Andy for the season. That's it's a pretty bad spot to be in. But we'll see. We'll see how this week goes. You know, a couple college football games in the semifinal and a final left after everything to bet the farm at. So Ohio State and Texas for this upcoming Friday. Kevin kind of has alluded to this, and in the preview that the guys went over. Ohio State is a juggernaut. And even though the game will be in Texas, where it is neutral site technically, but obviously Austin's a lot closer to Dallas than Columbus and the rest of the Ohio State fans, Ohio State is still 6 point favorites. So Vegas is expecting them to win by almost a touchdown. We're not getting much respect. I think Ohio State's just getting a ton of respect, which I think was well deserved on the money line, which means us winning outright. We're plus 190, which is almost 2 to 1. So you could bet $1 and win almost $2 back. And the over under for the game is at 53, which is a touch higher than the game's previously have been. But should be a great one. I really, guys, I don't know what y'all's angles are for this game, and I'm curious to hear it. Andy, we'll start with you first. How are you approaching this game from a betting perspective?
Yeah, so I think this game sets up well for my strategy. If you look on it on the face, Ohio State, they honestly have a lot of advantages, and you can make a very strong argument that they're going to win this game. Um, However, at some point, it might not be our game. It might be in the national championship, but at some point, Ohio State's going to feel the pressure of trying to win a national championship. Um, you can argue the last two games they've been able to play with not as much pressure, if that makes sense, because a lot of people were pessimistic about them. But now their entire fan base, they're thinking this is national championship or best again. And Texas is going to come into this game with no one picking them. Will Howard, like I mentioned, we that'll be entertaining to see his psyche going into this game. The all the players that came back for Ohio State this year thinking that they're going to win a national championship. I think there's a lot of internal pressure for Ohio State that could be disastrous for them in this game. And the longer that this is close, the more advantageous it will be for Texas. And the key, I think, is going to be the first quarter. Ohio State has been blowing out these teams early and getting out to these huge leads. If Texas can have a strong first quarter, which they've been doing all year, honestly, they've had really good first quarters as well. Um, I think it could be anyone's game. I'm going to say Texas shocks the world. Give me 2 units on the Texas money line.
So
So
we're
And
not
it
going
goes
against our
against it
gut.
goes against my gut. It goes against my gut
ah,
of looking at Ohio State and seeing the nature of their team and their roster and the makeup. It doesn't
Interesting.
make a lot of
Okay.
sense from a betting perspective.
Okay.
how many units
Okay.
was that bet again?
Two
2 units.
units.
And that was money line?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so I'm glad Andrew's like sign of the devil number caught some attention because I have like been falling on this chart like a lead weight. And I've been doing that by betting my conscience, right? So I'm gonna kind of steal Andrew's strategy here and go big like against what I think is gonna happen because I am afraid that, and you'll see it in my score prediction, like this is a game that could get away from us. And like I honestly think we have like a 30% chance of winning this game, which I would not have said in the SEC championship, in the game versus Georgia, or any of our big matchups this season. Like what what worries me is like the way that our team gave up the lead against Arizona State, who's not a team with athletes that are comparable to Texas, but they did have heart and they did play well. They're good, well coached. And like what you were saying, Andrew, like we forgot this funk where we basically don't do anything in the third quarter of like most of our games. And like what we saw against Arizona State was Sark kind of schemed up a couple plays that schematically made sense against what Arizona State was going to come out of. And we got a kick return, which made us overconfident. And then once it came to like, okay, let's play ball, like us versus them, we didn't do much, which makes me think of like, some takes about Sarkisian when he started his first season, his second season, about how his offense is just kind of like a bag of like tricks. And when it comes down to just like getting in the dirt and like running your scheme and just beating the hell out of someone, like his offense doesn't really work like that. Um, and that was kind of proven by what happened on 4th and 13. Like that play worked not because of great effort or great culture. It worked because the Longhorns kind of had the exact right play against Arizona State's exact right defense. And on paper, it made sense. We were lucky that that was the situation. But it's kind of like the same reason why we're good in our first drive of the game is why we executed there. Like it wasn't a heroic Heisman play. It was one of those scenarios where Sark's offense is schemed up for that exact scenario. So I feel like he's kind of running out of juice. Like there's a lot of film on Texas. Um, there's a template on how to beat us with different types of rosters. There's a template on how to beat us if you always recruit in the top five in the country. And there's a template on how to beat us if your team is comprised of transfers who are really excited about a first year head coach. So there's kind of like two ways to do it, right? And yeah, I think the road is ending, if I'm going to be honest. Like this is the last game of our season, and I hope that we can keep it close so that we can maintain momentum into the off season and move on and play awesome with Arch. But like from my heart of hearts, like I kind of think this is it. And I'm also really bad at betting, my conscience. So I'm gonna put 8 units on Texas money line.
Heck yeah, Kev. Let's go.
I love it.
Welcome to the price side.
I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Kevin, I feel like the analysis has been, I mean, it's always spot on, but I feel like for this episode especially, I feel like it's been really strong. Ohio State is a juggernaut. I told, I cannot disagree with that at all. I think the one angle that y'all cover that I have a glimmer of hope on is this like Will Howard, very, very like the one timeline that Will Howard I just think about him in overtime against us, fumbling around and just tossing the ball in the air. And I'm just manifesting that to happen against us. I feel like that's like our narrow pathway, like Paul Atreides finding the narrow path to our victory. But yeah, I cannot disagree with how with how tough it looks. For my angle on the game, I'm taking two units on the over. I know that outside of a few games, outside of that Oregon game, I think you guys said like they've been really shutting out opponents. I think, if Sark has anything left in the bag, like any tricks, I think now's the time to pull them out. Hopefully it gets us enough scores or enough to put some points on the board. And if not, I mean, Ohio State, I think will empty the clip on us too. So I think there will be hopefully a lot of points. And then I'm joining the money line party too. I'm doing 2 units on the Texas money line. I will, weather permitting, be at the game and representing us on the pod. So got to put something to cheer for while I'm at the game. And if I can make it past the polar vortex that's headed our way. So yeah, give me 2 units on Texas money line and 2 units on the total.
I
It's
like that
not
we're
it's
all in it
not
together,
yeah,
but
it's
I hope my pessimism has rubbed off because that could be a hard trip home. And
yeah, it's not a good sign when all three of us have the same side of a game. So we'll see.
yeah,
We'll see how that
but
Yeah, we'll
goes.
see about it.
enjoy it. Like I know I can speak for myself, but I think Andrew feels the same way. To turn down that opportunity to sit, you know, with Hamilton and in those seats where you might get on the screen, like it's gonna be amazing, dude. And that environment is
Yeah.
gonna be more significant than any other game we've ever had the opportunity to see in that stadium. That's gonna be really cool. Also, my
Yeah.
dad's gonna be there, so text him and say what's up.
Oh, nice, Charlie. I'll look out for you. Okay,
Nice.
I will get those bets in. Fellas, let's hear some score predictions. Pessimistic Kev, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, just a couple more points on why. Like, why, Kevin, are you doing this? Like, I'm currently driving to DFW. Like, why are you making me sad? Um, Before the season started, the MO on the team was like, Sark's got the players, he's built up the talent, he's recruited his guys, like this is the year. And then a few days pass and CJ Baxter gets a really bad knee injury. And the talk kind of changed to we've still got good depth, but this is going to be a team that needs to be a pass-led offense. And that's basically what we're seeing now. We've learned the names of 2 new running backs and have come to appreciate them very much. But the team kind of lives and dies by Quinn, who is great, but hasn't quite met expectations for a lot of us. Um, I don't know how many penalties we had against Arizona State, but the last few games we've played outside of the Clemson one, it's been just wrought with penalties and like stupid mistakes. Um, False starting after we come out of a timeout, the things we're doing for no reason. And Quinn is not playing consistent 4 quarter games. So we're coming up against, we've said it a lot, a juggernaut. I do think the road ends here. I want to state it clearly because I have been optimistic. All of our listeners seem to know that has changed. I hope that this is the score because I think he could get away from us. I'm taking 20-27. Ohio State beats us by a touchdown.
All right. Andrew, what about you?
That's fair. I can't really argue if, as a fan, if you're not optimistic about this game, about this matchup. y'all already know that I'm taking Texas to win this game. One point that I want to mention is that I'm still perfect on my CFP bracket. I have not missed a game so far, and I predicted Texas to win the national championship. Let's hope the good fortunes continue. I'm going to take the inverse of Kevin's score. Give me 27-20 Texas.
Nice. Nice. Okay, I'll round us out here. I think it's going to be 27-28. Texas is going to be down late in the fourth quarter. Bert Auburn is going to have a chance to redeem himself for a walk-off field goal to send us to the CFP final. 30-28, Texas on top. That's what I am manifesting, and that's what I'm hoping for. That's
Yeah.
what I'm hoping for.
Don't get me wrong. Me too. Me too. But prepare yourselves
I
because
know,
this
I
this
know.
really might be
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And I have to drive back like early Saturday morning for a baby shower. That was the deal for me to drive up. I need to be back in town for a friend's, like one of Emily's best friends and our dear friend's baby shower, which is at 10 a.m. on Saturday. So if we lose, that's going to be a miserable ride. If we win, it's going to fly by. I'm just going to be on
Yeah.
euphoria. I might just drive back like right after the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
And if
man.
if we win, I think we would be favored against either Penn State or Notre Dame, right, Andrew?
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah,
Yeah.
we
that's what
win,
it
the
looks
road
like.
the road gets clear. Like this is that giant pothole in that road that you drive a lot. And I feel like we are driving up to it and we're like on our phone and we're like about to hit it and be like, oh crap, I forgot about that. But watching ASU, all of us had to come to terms with like, dang, this really might be it. Is this it?
Yeah.
And remind yourself of that feeling and prepare for it because we shouldn't be, dejected and super defeated about a loss here because that's still like an incredible season.
For
I think we're
sure.
the
Yeah.
only team to make it to the CFP semifinal in the last 2 years. Our recruiting class next year is looking amazing. I think we're ranked number one in the country. Like, talent's not going to stop. The coaches aren't going to go anywhere. There's nothing to worry about long term, but this one just scares me.
Yeah. All right. Well, therapist Kev, thanks for prepping us. Thanks for getting our emotional IQ up and our emotional health up and ready for this Friday's game. That'll do it for us this week. Thanks again for listening. And if you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, wherever you find podcasts. And let's say if we crack 300 viewers on YouTube, we'll release the Shoey video. We'll release the Shoey video. I did not pre-warn Kevin on this, but we're gonna get it. If we get over 300 on
Sounds good.
YouTube, share it with your friends, and we'll see you all on the next Football on the 40.
Hook 'em.